What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with a prize picks preview for round one of the Hero World Challenge. Going to bring you an idea of what to expect from Albany here on Thursday, the venue for this week's event. And then at the end, going to go through my top three props here for the first round to help you build some slips and hopefully cash out for some money. Last week was the first video for, at least 2 months at this point where we got absolutely wiped out. So if anything, we're due to go out there and bounce back this week. It was such a top heavy field. 20 player field, so small, but one of the best in terms of quality that you're going to see all year. Plenty of guys there in the top 5, top 10 in the official World Golf rankings. And really, it's everybody but Rory McIlroy that'll be teeing it up this week. So also no Tiger Woods. He did withdraw from the event, but still all top quality players that we've been betting on all year. So let's get this started with the course, which is Albany. Already talked about that, but an easy course. Played 2.5 strokes under par last year, but unfortunately, one of the courses we don't have shots gained data for. It's in the Bahamas, New Providence, there on Nassau, and anytime we're leaving the United States for a golf tournament, they're not going to have nearly as much data as we have over there stateside. So it's a little bit of a bummer. It's a relatively long golf course, 7,400 yards, but let's use all of the tools at our disposal. So heading over here to Pro Visualizer, we can get a hole-by-hole breakdown. Now they have it at just 73.47 in terms of your yardage, so right around 73.50 in terms of your yardage. It's going to play a little bit longer, but what I want to point out here is that there are 5 par 5s and 5 par 3s, but there's also 2 par 4s that are drivable. So you have the drivable par 4 7th, that's only 340 yards. And then you also have a par 4 number 14, that's only 327 yards. So you're looking at 2 holes where players are going to, at the very least, be right up near the green with their tee shot. And then 5 par 5s, which should be solid birdie looks. And in fact, last year, all 7 of those holes, so the 5 par 5s, the 2 drivable par 4s, played to over a 30% birdie rate. So you're looking at probably 2.5, 3 birdies for the entire field right there, let alone if they're going to take advantage of all of their opportunities, they could post 4 or 5 birdies themselves on just those 7 holes, let alone some of the gettable par 4s, right? Just 435 yards, 450 yards. That's the reasoning for the scoring average, right? Because 7,400 yards is relatively long. The greens here have a little bit of undulation to them. The fairways have an especially a high amount of undulation on them. So it's got its little tricks to it. And it's also typically pretty windy out there. So when I go over here to the wind forecast, you can see for Thursday, you are going to see that weather impact, 12 to 14 miles an hour of sustained winds for the entire day, and then also close to 20 miles an hour there in the afternoon in terms of your wind gusts. That's significant, right? Typically, when we get above 10 mile an hour sustained winds is when we start to get a little bit worried about it. And when we get above the 15 mile an hour wind gusts is also when it starts to impact play. And last year, it was beautiful Thursday through Saturday. So this 2.5 under scoring average is probably a little bit better than what we're going to see around this time, because not only is the weather pretty dicey for tomorrow, it is throughout the entire weekend. In fact, tomorrow's weather is the most benign the weather is going to be all week. So you're going to see the lowest scores tomorrow that you'll see the entire golf tournament, which is really going to put this number out of reach. I think that tomorrow you're going to see it played closer to like 2.5 strokes under par at the very best. Probably closer to like 2.2 under par is where I would probably put the field average. You have easier pin locations than what you're going to see for Sunday last year, but with similar sort of wind conditions, it only played 1.85 shots under par on Sunday. So small sample size, only 20 players in only 1 day of a 4-round event, but it played about 0.7 shots harder with that sort of wind. So that's why I'm accounting for it to play a little bit more difficult this time around. On Wednesday, there's a few showers going through the area that should make the greens extra receptive, and could be a few showers that go through the area on Thursday morning as well. So you can see that there on the wind finder forecast. If that happens, it's only going to make the course play a little bit easier, which is why I still think it's going to play easier than what we saw for last Sunday, right? More receptive greens, but also you have to add in the fact that it's Thursday pin locations as opposed to the more difficult locations that you're going to have for a Sunday round. So all of that to say that I think it's going to be an easy course, just maybe a little bit harder than what we saw for last year's iteration. So with that being said, what props do I like? So let's start with the Birdie or Better board, where we're going to be taking the over on Scottie Scheffler, who is arguably the best player in the field, at least in terms of world golf ranking. He's the top ranked player that's actually teeing it up. Obviously no Rory McIlroy this week, but also a perfect course fit. He was able to finish in the top 3 last year, nearly ended up winning this golf tournament, and he's got the elite driving we're looking for at a relatively long golf course, but also elite distance to take care of those 5 par 5s. A few of them are close to 600 yards, a few of them actually over 600 yards, right? 600 on the dot, 606 right there. I mean, even 589 is relatively lengthy, and sure, you do have, a 547 yard par 5, but to take advantage of these drivable par 4s, you've got to be someone that can carry it 305, 310 yards, and Scottie certainly has that in the bag. So I like the course fit. I like the fact that he played well here last year, and the ball striking over the last month or so, though he hasn't played all that much, he's been top 5, top 3 in the field. In fact, he's the best off the tee player in this field over that range, and then top 5 with the approach stats as well. So really checking a lot of the boxes we're looking for. You'd hope that you can get hot with the putter, perhaps make a few 20 to 25 footers, but based on the style of golf course, the drivable par 4s, the par 5s that you're likely going to be at least greenside and 2 for an elite distance guy like a Scottie Scheffler, he doesn't exactly have to have the putter to get to 5 birdies, right? He could have 5 tap-ins on the day if the ball striking is going to be there, which is why I really like going after some of these longer players because, unlike somebody like a Fitzpatrick, maybe a Morikawa, certainly like a Sepp Straka, they're going to have to make a few putts. They're not really going to be reaching a lot of these par 5s and 2. So that's what, the utility in getting to some of these elite distance sort of players. You don't have to worry about the putters much. Next up, we've got Xander Schauffele, so 4.5 birdies, at that same mark as a Scottie Scheffler. Another elite driver of the golf ball, one that particularly likes no-cut events. So because there's only 20 players, they will be playing all 4 rounds, but there won't be a cut line, right? They're not going to go from 20 down to 10 players. It's already a small enough field as is, and for whatever reason, there's not really a reason for this, at least that we know of, right? It's hard to quantify. Xander Schauffele has multiple wins, and he doesn't have that many wins on his record, right? You got to remember that. He's a great player, but doesn't have a ton of wins to speak of. Almost all of them, at least before this year, came at no-cut events. A lot of his, runner-up finishes were at no-cut events, Century Tournament at Champions. A lot of the WGCs he's had a lot of success at. Weird field events like what you have with the team event with like Patrick Cantlay, for example. He's found a lot of success at atypical events. Again, it's hard to quantify that sort of effect. Maybe it's the pressure that's taken off of them. Maybe the smaller field, more relaxed atmosphere really plays into his advantage. But either way, it's a trend that hasn't just happened for the last year or so. It's happened his entire career. So you got to like that for Xander. You got to like the distance off the tee. One of the better players in this field to begin with. And much like a Scottie Scheffler, because of that elite level ball striking, he might not have to depend on going out there and making those 10 to 15 foot putts. And if there's somebody I do actually want to make those 10 to 15 foot putts, Xander's a pretty good option for it, right? He's not the best putter on tour, but he's certainly well above average, approaching that elite tier when it comes to his shots gained putting stats. So another player that I love to get to that 5 birdie mark. And let's go over to strokes. There's actually quite a few strokes props that I like, but just going to give you one here for the video. I will remind you, and I do have other birdie or better props I'm taking too. They are on my Patreon page, right? So I give you guys a bunch of props here on YouTube for free, particularly for round 1. Now that, we don't have as much golf going on, obviously there won't be videos for the next month or so, but when we get back into it, there's going to be a lot of these videos coming out, but I can't go over every prop I'm taking, right? The guys that are paying, supporting the channel, they're going to get access to everything I have to offer, but I'll give you the general idea with the strokes props here with Sungjae Im at 70 strokes. The average last Sunday, or I should say for last year, right, was 1.85 shots under par. I'm projecting the average to be like maybe 2.1, 2.2 strokes under par. that means that a Sanjay Im, who I have projected as right about an average player of the field, we'd project for maybe like 69.8 strokes, 69.7 strokes, something along that fashion. And then when you consider the form he has coming in, that projection gets bumped down to actually sub 69 strokes. So if you look at his form, I mean, especially towards the end of last season, I mean, he had the, near win there at the Tour Championship, runner-up finish at the Wyndham week before that, another top 3 finish. You're not going to find a hotter player on tour. The only part to worry about with a Sanjay is the lack of play. He's typically one of the more busy players on tour, and he's taken a little bit of a break this fall swing, right? Sat back, not played quite as much as he has in the past, which is probably good for his mental health, just getting everything around. So you do have to worry about that aspect. But the form when we have seen him play, I mean, at the President's Cup, he was one of the better players at that event, let alone, probably the second best player on the international squad behind Tom Kim there. You got to like the trend and the direction that he's moving in. So just, from the numbers perspective, we're going to project the field for just under 70 strokes, which is going to make a lot of the guys at 70 make sense. I mean, even like a Straka at 70 and a half, and a lot of the elite tier guys at 69 and a half strokes, I'd probably consider taking the under there too. So just wanted to throw it out there. The way I'm putting these together are in a flex play, and I'll explain it a little bit. So first and foremost, the power for, power play actually got reduced here. So if you take 3 props in the same direction, now you're only getting 4x as opposed to 5x, which kind of sucks. The flex play was not impacted in terms of its payout. So I guess that's part of the reason for that. But also, if we end up pushing this Sanjay prop, right, he ends up shooting a 70 rather than a 69. That's well within his range of outcomes. This goes down to a 2-leg power that pays 3x, right? So, you get paid the full amount. If it's pretty much just like taking it down to the next thing. It's not like we're worrying about a pay decrease there. And honestly, a lot of you out there are looking for like 6-man cards, 5-man cards. I get the question all the time, like, oh wow, the multiplier in golf sucks, so on and so forth. Guys, if you're playing 4 or 5-man cards for a majority of your exposure, that's probably why you're losing player on Prize Picks. The sweet spot for me has been 4-leg powers, but running a bunch of them, right, differentiating. If you do 3-leg powers, that's pretty solid, particularly if you're getting the full 5x payout. And even 2-leg power plays, I know they're not sexy, right? But they're a solid way to build your bankroll, particularly if you're working with, 60 to 65% hit rate, like what I've been running at the last few months. Guys, that's the way to take apart Prize Picks. It's not going after these 5-leg, 6-leg flexes that they added. Why do you think they added a 6-leg flex? You think they're just going to let you print money off of a large card like that? Like no, they're doing it for a reason. So just keep that in mind, everyone out there. With some of these multipliers, like just sometimes you got to be willing to take less money to go after a more plus EV card. And obviously, right, let me show you an example here, right? Let's add a bunch of these like unders, and obviously you can't play Scotty Scheffler twice. Just trying to prove a point here. A 6-leg card here only pays 15x if you pay them all in the same direction, right? So don't play a card like this. Like obviously, like right, there's limits to this, but I don't know, like if you added in like 1 over, right, and you got like the 20x, which is a slightly lower payout than what you would have gone otherwise. I don't hate entering that sort of card if that's what you really think's going to happen. Like don't get tricked into being like, oh, I got to go for the 30x, which by the way, you would have to play like half and half. So if you took 3 overs on strokes and then the 3 supportive stances, oh, now you get 30x, right? They try to like bait you into that. I mean, sure, if the slate calls for that, you really do find 3 overs or 3 unders that you really like, go ahead and enter those sort of cards. That's fine, right? And there's slates where that's the case. But on an easy golf course like this, it's all going to be props in the same direction. I think that everyone should take this place apart. The weather's going to be the best that you're going to get all week. And, sometimes that's going to impact the payouts. But our hit rate on these sort of slates is going to be a lot higher than on a slate where it's more evenly matched, where the board's a little bit more appropriately priced, right? So just understand that there's trade-offs in all of these sort of situations. And my advice would be out there would be play a lot of these 2-leg cards for 3x payout, right? Maybe take Scotty and Xander together. Maybe do a card down here, right? If you're just working on these 3 props. Obviously, I'm working with a lot more, so I can differentiate a little bit more. But play a Scotty and Sanjay Im, right? Maybe go with the Sanjay and Xander, right? Play that 3 rather than going with the 3-leg flex. I don't know, have at it, right? Have your fun with how you want to differentiate your cards. Again, the one piece of advice would be not to chase those really big payouts. But that is all I've got here for this preview. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and smash that like button. Also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content in the future. And best of luck with all of your cards here for Thursday. it looks like it should be a solid slate, right? A lot of overs that we can take, a lot of smaller cards that I'm going after, but a lot of times those are some of the more profitable slates, right? Like you're not going to have one card that thinks for like 12.5x or something like that. But let's say we hit like 6 out of the 7 props that I put out there. You're probably looking at like at least a 2.5x day, probably a 3x day if you're hitting some of those 4 or 5 leg cards. You can never complain about that, right? Profit is profit when it comes to prize picks, DFS, particularly when you're tripling your money in one day. So let's go ahead and leave it at that. Best of luck, boys, and I'll catch you guys next time.